Again, we'll just maintain the same rules that we all are aware of that we just read in our previous meeting, and we will begin with the roll call.
Cliff Strachan,
Brian Jones,
Dave Sewell, Gary Winterton, David Harding, Bryce Mumford,
George Handley,
Mayor Kafusi.
Dave Connect,
Dave Connect,
Gary McGinn, and Gary McGinn.
George Stewart's in the hall.
He's right there. He's just walking there.
now he's walking away.
Now he's walking away. He'll be here in a second. Okay, we welcome you and thank you. We will look to presentation, but on budget items for
Mr. Winterton, there is one more item. It's just the, for some on the consent.
On the consent, Brian, will you do that for us?
Yes, so in our last work meeting, there was a presentation made about the Utah County Municipal Recreation Grant for Provo Trail Renovations. In a leadership meeting, we discussed it might be appropriate for this item to go on to the consent agenda, but our rules don't allow the chair to do that if the council has actually moved the item by motion. So we suggested in leadership that it might be appropriate, if that's the consensus, for a motion in this meeting to have that item appear on the consent agenda next week instead of on the action agenda.
Thank you. Any discussion about that? Basically what it is, it's authorizing the mayor to submit for a grant. Any questions or concerns about that? Do we need to vote on that?
Yeah, well, you do need
Okay,
a
I'll look for
motion.
a motion to move this to the consent agenda. Dave Sewell and Dave Connect as a second. Those in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously with David being excused. Okay, now we will go to Gary.
Okay, good. Actually, I think this, time-wise, everything works out. I think there was some confusion. I think staff thought I wanted an hour for my budget presentation, which I didn't. I only wanted a half hour, and then we do have some things with zoning enforcement to talk about. So I think we're going to be okay on time, and not any more rush for things than we already are planning. So Community Development Department, part of what we do in community development is we think we're helping the community, the council, the city as a whole to build great communities. And in our department, we've got, how many now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 main functions. And the first one is building inspection, and we'll go through and talk about each of these. Then planning. We have property management ombudsman in community development, parking administration, and zoning enforcement. And our budget for this coming year is very similar to the base budget of previous years that you've seen. We do have the addition in community development of parking administration. And we'll go in a little more detail about that budget when we get there. But the rest of what we have is pretty stable budget-wise. So building inspection, the two main functions that we do in building inspection is plan review and then field inspections. And this is a great kind of panoramic view of the city center temple when it was under construction and on piers. So our department, when an entity wants to build a project like this, they come in, they submit plans to us. We go through and review the plans that they have submitted to ensure that they comply with all health safety, life safety codes from the building codes. We look at fire codes. We do look at with other departments on other issues, but the primary responsibility is in our department. We then, during construction, go out and visit these projects. And a project like this is fairly easy for us to do in the sense that You're working on a large commercial project. They usually have very good architects and designers and engineers and construction companies involved. And relatively speaking, that's a fairly, even though it looks really complicated and difficult, and it is, and the value of this project, I think, was around 100 million, exclusive of FF&E. And so just doing it, it's in some ways a fairly easy project for us to handle. Then occasionally we do have a Board of Appeals where our interpretation of a code or an issue, they go to our Building Code Board of Appeals. And that frankly happens very infrequently. As a matter of fact, I can't remember the last time. I think it's 3 years ago on this project that we went to the board. And it really was to go in and look at a new construction method or way of dealing with something. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to take it to the Board of Appeals, just to make sure everybody was comfortable with the direction it was going. In building inspection, this is a 5-year permit summary. And a pretty interesting thing, as we have, in one of the overarching projects that community development's been involved in for more than a year is the 360 project. And so in the 360 project, we've had to go in and all of our old data and information, scrub it, get it into shape, get it transferred into the new system. And we're still continually finding problems with things. But this is a fairly good summary. So as you can see down here, year to date, we're at a total valuation of 27 million. And several years ago, back in the 11, 12, 13 time frame, we were around $1 billion worth of investment in Provo City with new construction. And so the numbers have gone down over time, but some of the interesting things you can see, single family permits are up with their valuation, and you look at like a $100 million project from BYU or a mall or something like that, we will spend less time reviewing and inspecting those projects than we will these 139 single family homes. They just take a lot more time and effort. And then when we come down and we're doing what we really don't have in here are a lot of the remodels in tenant finishes in people's basements. And 50 of those can take more time than a $100 million project because we're dealing with weekend warriors and trying to help them through their projects and making them safe. At this time, we've had some recent retirements, or CBO retired. Dan Stubbs, we've hired a new CBO from internally. Doug Fallon, he's now the CBO. And Skip Tandy, our plans examiner, he also retired. And we hired from within. And it's James Anderson's our new plans examiner. And then we've hired other people. Over the years, we've really tried to stress cross-training in functions and to have people ready to go when new things need to happen.
Gary.
Yes.
So in 2017, your largest category was miscellaneous?
Yeah. Miscellaneous, people doing a lot of things. So miscellaneous would be like a tenant finish, could be a tenant finish in an existing mall, those types of things to home remodels and things along those lines. We haven't broken it out more. Hopefully with the new program, once it's all completely ready to go and all the bugs are out, we'll be able to dive down and do better reporting than we have right now.
Why are we dropping it? Do you know why we're dropping? Is it coming out of the recession, and all of a sudden we got this boom? Or
dropping in where?
In the value of the properties.
Oh, on 2015?
Yeah. Well, you said $1 billion, we were doing $1 billion before, now we're down to.
Well, and that billion was the life sciences, it was the MTC, it was the city center temple.
New skin expansion.
Yeah, the new skin expansion. And so we had these really big expansions, and it was really difficult to keep up with that, but we kind of gotten through that boom. And I think we're now in a more normal cycle in dealing with stuff. You know, and that's the hard thing of gauging the workflow because we want to be here, and when we're really super busy, we're a little stressed. In the summer, we're not taking vacations, we're doing that. And then in the winter, the work is down here, and we have extra time to do training and keeping up their continuing education to keep their certifications and things like that. And so, yeah, back in, boy, 11, 12, 13, that was a hard time, wasn't it, Wayne? From the standpoint of trying to deal with all of those. And it was at that time, I kept telling Wayne, now get ready, I'm going to come in, I'm going to have to request another inspector. But we've been able to do things, we've been using overtime in some situations, and so we're kind of through that period.
So you actually had in 2016 somebody, 2 projects investing in agriculture, new?
Yeah. Ask me what they are off the top of my head. I have no idea, but some things going on out there. Now, the interesting thing with agriculture now, people can do a lot of agriculture work, and state law has exempted them from coming in and getting building permits. So if you're going to build a barn or something like that, that's not going to be habitable, then you can just go out and do it. Yeah, any other questions? This is always a pretty fascinating graphic to have. So we're on track to have a pretty comparable year with single family residential, and there's several projects out there coming online. Okay. Oops. So planning. So planning, our main functions, we deal with boards and commissions. We've got 6 total that community development deals with. And we talked a lot today about 2 of them, Planning Commission and TMAC, but we have more. And so it's divided up into current planning, long-range planning, and historic preservation is kind of how we divide up the work in the office. And this is, for us here in Utah, this is where it all began. This is the Plat of Zion, 1833. And so fundamentally, a lot of things in Utah have its roots from how we're doing it. Notice the great grid system. So you go into the older parts of town, the pioneer neighborhoods, they've got great grid systems. And then as we got modern and fancy, we went out, we have now a lot of cul-de-sacs and winding roads and things like that. And now the interesting thing is the current theory and planning is, boy, we really got to have a grid system, got to get back to it. So things come and go in planning. So with our boards and commissions, we have Planning Commission, we have the Board of Adjustment, Design Review Committee, Transportation Mobility Advisory Committee, and the Landmarks Commission. So in current planning, current planning is pretty much what it sounds like, is people come in and they want to do something in the city. They want to have an idea to start a business or build a building, residential, and we come in and we help them through that process. And often they'll have to do a rezone or a text amendment or get their subdivisions done or project plans or do a conditional use application to be able to do what it is that they want to do. We come in and here's one that's out there, a mixed use residential project coming through the process. And we just go through that. And when you see this, that means there has been a lot of this going on. They're very related. And when the economy crashes and there's not a lot of applications coming in, we're slowing down on planning, we know in a little while we're going to be doing a lot more or a lot less building inspection. We're doing quite a bit of planning right now, current planning. A lot of people coming in, proposals, especially on that southwest area. Every time I turn around, it seems like the price per acre has jumped 10,000, almost monthly. We also do long-range planning. And so with this, right now, currently, some of the long-range plans that we're working on are the Mazerhood neighborhood plan, the Temp neighborhood plan, the West Side neighborhood plan. This is a little graphic talking about some of the inventory out there in that area going on. General plan work in general, and along with other departments, we occasionally do a bunch of work with FEMA. That doesn't happen all the time, but most recently it has in the last year or two. And then historic preservation. One of the big things we did, our historic tour this last summer, we had over 400 people come, go through it. The Taylor House won an award. That's with Habitat for Humanity. The Temple won an award, and the Alexander House in Circle. They both won historic preservation awards. But we also have a website that they've worked on. This is Provo, www.thisisprovo.com, and it's about the historic structures and things we have in town. And we've got, in this last year, over 41,000 views in 2017 on it. One of the things we do is property management. The ombudsman is one of my least favorite slides because it's just a whole bunch of things that they've been working on. This is a division of one. It's Tara Riddle. She's the property manager. Helps the city go out and acquire pieces of property, helps the city sell them, picks up easements, things, different property that's needed, and is the ombudsman. And so on difficult situations, somebody doesn't quite know how to navigate the city system, they can call her and she can hopefully get them in contact with the appropriate person. We try to use 311 as much as possible because that's what it's there for. But sometimes there's a really difficult or complicated or nuanced issue that may take several departments to deal with. And Tara knows the city and the city system well and is good at getting people where they need to go. Whereas 311 is, more so, if you've got a street light out, we know exactly where that goes, and that's an easy one to handle. This is the new division in community development. The proposal is parking administration. And so parking administration, going to talk a little bit about wayfinding, parking lots, parking garages, enforcement, some of the long-range planning that's being done, and a budget for it. So this is Park Provo trying to brand parking in Provo so that people can recognize it and it's easy to deal with. One of the things that we've been going out, a few years ago, we had a consultant come in with parking. And one of the things they said, city, we've got to do a better job of wayfinding. And so as we're finishing up some wayfinding things, in the meantime, we've gone out and just put in temporary wayfinding around town. You've probably seen some of these signs up to try and help people find their way to public parking. And so we've gone out in areas and put these that will, the crumb trail that people can follow to get to public parking. Yeah.
So I have to laugh when I see the public parking, and right above it says no parking anytime.
Yeah. Well, and that's not public parking for the street. What it's intended to tell you is parking is left at the next intersection.
Right.
Yeah, but don't park right there.
Is it working?
I'm sorry?
Is it working, or do you have any idea?
Yeah, we've been getting actually quite a bit of feedback. from the people who've been going to the convention center or other parking lots that it's helpful, and it is helping people find places.
Let me give you another anecdote. There's been times where I've gone downtown with my wife and another couple or another couples, and we have really struggled not knowing, can we park in the town center garage and all of that stuff, and it's been difficult. We went down this past weekend, and there were a couple of these signs up, made it really clear. Of course, it still says $2 there. Yeah. But I have learned that.
I have a slide for that.
Yeah, good. But those temporary signs made it really, it was very crystal clear how to get into that garage, and there was no question, just the question of whether I was going to pay $2 to get out. But other than that, it was a very good experience, and it's better than it's been. So thank you.
Good, and so there's an idea that there will be a permanent solution, but that hasn't happened yet, and so we're, in the meantime, these are just these little corrugated signs that can go up on these poles to help people figure out where they are. Another thing that we've been doing is special events or event parking. So we'll come out, and there may be a time where we're going to have an event in town, and we'll go out, we'll work with the convention center or other people and actually put up on a temporary basis these signs so that people know it's event parking and can find it. And we've been getting good feedback on that also. Parking lots. This is the Freedom Lot, the RC Willie block. That has gone in. Part of that was to work with the convention and the county to resolve the parking concerns. And so this was a project that took a lot of help and cooperation with a lot of other departments in the city to get it done. There's still an issue with the foundation of the Sears building, but this is that temporary parking. That's part of that solution with the convention center. And we've been working with the convention center on getting people in there and dealing with the parking that's arising from there. Another one that's coming up is the IFA properties down by Startup District sold and to the RDA. And so there's a chance to put in some probably temporary parking. It won't be a long-term solution, but more off-street parking down in that area. So with the city being or the redevelopment agency picking up that property, we're going to be going in there and doing some striping and, some minor things to get it in shape so that people can park on it.
Did it demolish the building?
I'm sorry?
Did it demolish the building?
Do you know where they're?
So we're considering it again. Our hope is that we anchor a larger redevelopment project in the area, and we do have a very heavy concrete foundation, which should take a fair amount of money to get out so we could park over the top of it. So I think as we're talking to neighboring owners, I think our intent is to sort of withhold judgment on that for the moment. So we'll try to park around the building in the back lot, add another, 35 to 50 spaces, I think, depending on how we configure it. Give a little bit of a relief valve until we decide what to do with the building.
And that building really won't go away until there's a project, just because it would be so prohibitively expensive to get that foundation out and then not have an idea of what we're going to do with it.
And it's still a useful building, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although we don't want to tie our hands, so
Right, no.
if there is an opportunity, I hate to move a renter in there, for example, and then have a challenge of getting him out when we need to move quickly. So yeah, but the building's sound, so it's not going to fall down.
Okay, parking garages. The redevelopment agency has participated in several parking garages in town. This is Provo Town Square, and across the street to the west is the Marriott, and then there's Zions Bank and Wells Fargo. And so this is what it looks like today. If you were to go there, and there's not very good signage, things like that. The underlying ground is actually owned by the redevelopment agency, but the town square operates the parking garage. and we have a contract with them. We've been working with them, and some of the maintenance and things have not been going the way that we think they should go, and the upkeep of this hasn't been done appropriately over the years. And so in our contracts talk with them, we're talking initially with them about them possibly just stepping away from it, and the city, not only do we own the underlying property, but we could actually take it over and deal with it. One of the things in the meantime, and we're just beginning those discussions and negotiations. My guess is initially that we'll probably want to take this over and manage it ourselves and manage it appropriately. Or if we find someone else who would take it and do it, that's also a possibility. In the meantime, with the operator of this, we are actually talking about, here's another view of it, the existing conditions. So this is the back area, and this is the gate where you would pay your $2, which is broken. So, and it's been broken for a long time. So if you do park in there, you're not paying $2 to get out, because you just go out. But here's just a mock-up of some initial improvements that we want to do. And then in all of the parking garages in which we have an interest, to work with them to commonly brand public parking. So when you see the wayfinding signs, when you see the signs for a parking garage, you know it's public parking. To clarify what the rules actually are, when you can park and when you can't, and we're working through signage, different ways to convey that clearly for people. And that will be one of the issues that we'll have to deal with on this parking garage is, okay, if we take it over, there are contracts with existing businesses there that are leasing stalls. And how are we going to do it? How are we going to make it available to the public? You know, do we charge? Do we not charge? And so there's some important issues that here in the next few months we're going to have to really start dealing with and thinking about. And this common branding would be something we'd want to do on all of the parking structures that we have, in which we have an interest. And so again, this would be, you know, part of that common branding, and you can see the rules and the things that are going on with that. And a lot of this, we're in the process. You should be looking for more of this coming up here in the next few weeks to next couple of months. Parking administration, part of it's enforcement. Right now, enforcement is in the parking enforcement group, the guys that are in the Jeeps and they drive around and give tickets. It's in customer service. And for right now, the proposal is it would just stay in customer service. It seems to be functioning well and working well. And so we'll be coordinating with them. One of the things that we're doing in conjunction with customer service is we're getting data from our tickets and where that data is, and we're mapping it, and we're figuring out where the hot spots and problem areas are, what types of enforcement's going on. What we have been doing in the downtown for the last month, and we're going to continue it for another month, is we've been increasing and making more routine our enforcement of Center Street and the parking downtown. And then when we get that data, and we have that data about what's going on, we want to sit down with the downtown merchants and that organization and go through it and see if they've noticed an increase in this enforcement that we're doing, if they're getting the right results.
How long has it been in customer service? Because it wasn't police, was it?
It wasn't police. It's been about 6 months.
Yeah, or maybe 4 months.
Maybe 4 months in police. And so now it's out of police in customer service. So the supervisor of that is Sandy Bucio, and she reports to Karen Larson in customer service. And then she has several, I think 4 part-time parking enforcement people. Yes.
you talk about, finding out, using the data to see where the hotspots are. These are hotspots for where the tickets are written, not necessarily hotspots for where the parking infractions are occurring. Because to get a ticket, you have to have the infractions and enforcement, and there may be areas that.
Yeah. See, and that's why in downtown, when we come in and we show later after we have another month of data, we can sit down with them and say, look, this is the enforcement we've been doing. This is how we've been doing it. And this is what the data shows. What are we missing? Is it not working? Are you getting the results from that you want? And my imagination on this is going to be a bit of an iterative process with them to try and size it just right, and because the goal of parking and parking enforcement is to make things better for everybody, not to give tickets. It's to make it better. And so if the enforcement that we're doing is we're writing lots of tickets, but we're not getting the results at the end of the day we want, we really need to rethink that. Or if we're not writing many tickets and we're not getting the results, we'll adjust our enforcement. So with them, we've sat down. They're kind of letting us take the lead in thinking and coordinating with them where we think the enforcement ought to be and going forward with that. Okay, so here's some more signs that we're going to be putting up. This is just a big laundry list, and I'm not going to read this whole thing to you of all of the things that we've been doing since July of last year, June or July, in parking and working on things that are going on. Now, here's the budget. So in community development with this, we now have a budget right now, and this is a preliminary budget, and it hasn't been finalized, but what we're looking at is a total budget of $264,000. In there, we have our personnel costs. We also have operations of $114,000. We do have some capital. What's this $37,000 is to have a pool of money that we can use to complete wayfinding, and when wayfinding gets damaged or we have to put a new one in, we've got a wayfinding bank. There's also a bank in there for dealing with bicycle parking that can go in, a few $1,000s to deal with bicycle parking. We also looking on some contract services. We've got $93,000 in there. One of the things that we need to do is we had hired some engineers in the past to come in and look at some of the parking garage, specifically the Marriott garage, and a casual brief look at the town center. And the Marriott is not in good shape at all. And there's a couple of $1 million worth of maintenance and things that need to be done to that. But it's been a few years now, we do need to get that refreshed. We need to do some things at town center. And with town center, some of our contract services and things that we'll be doing. If you've ever been in town center, there are burned out light bulbs and broken lenses on lights. There's a storm drain inlet that's broken, and there's a bunch of things that we need to go in and just power clean it, things like that, paint some things, make it more presentable, safe.
Some of the maintenance, if it's not done, will endanger the integrity of the structure, right?
Yes, yes. And that's frankly the problem we have over at the Marriott, is over the years, some of the maintenance hasn't been done. And so there's actually some structural issues with it. And so part of what we're doing now are things that we think are obvious that we need to do. And part of our budgetary approach with this is let's go slow and go about this thoughtfully. So on the negotiations with the town center, if we do take that over, there is maintenance that needs to be done. We've got in there some obvious things. We want to get a consultant or a professional who can come in and make sure we don't have any structural things, but get our arms around where we are right now today, and then come up with a plan, and in the future bring that back to the council of exactly what we think we need to do once we've determined how we're going to handle the town center.
Okay, with regard to public relations, $200. It seems to me, I understand the wayfinding signs. I wonder if public relations, what is that? Is that an education? Or I think that we need to educate our people more about parking downtown. And I don't know if $200 is sufficient to actually say, this is what we've got, folks. I don't know, what are you?
Yeah, and some of that education, we had frankly more in mind using it for mailers and things like that, or printing up some information sheets.
You're not going to get much for $200.
No, we're not. And, you know, but that's, again, that's kind of this go slow. We've been pretty generous on like contract services, and we're just trying to balance all of these things. And part of what we're going to be doing is coming back in more detail as we get better information. I don't know frankly, what kind of public relations or outreach is going to be the right thing to do with this one. And so in some respects, the $200 is more of a marker than anything, because I don't have a specific plan right now to tell you how we're going to spend it. And again, this is a work in progress. Some of these numbers, as we go through it, like all of the budget numbers that you're seeing right now, could change a little bit. Okay, so community development needs. We haven't gotten to zoning, and the reason why is because Carrie's here, and she's going to go through some of the things that we've been doing the last year and the numbers and that we have. But one of community development needs, we do have a supplemental request that we've submitted, and it's in the zoning division, and it's for a full-time secretary. Right now, we have a part-time secretary that helps zoning. And the reasons for that is recently, the council last year approved 2 new enforcement officers for us. And with that comes additional help. And then the increased paperwork with the rental disclosure law that's come in. We're finding nobody wants to look for their own certificate. That we're getting calls on those things, which isn't far off of what we expected. And so the total cost for this, I think, is approximately, since it is part-time, it's the cost of the insurance benefits, things like that, and then a little bit more money from a 25 hours a week to 40 hours a week. And so that's I think we put in requests, what was it, 40,000, and I think that's, Dustin's looking that up quickly.
You say certificate, you're talking license.
Yeah, the license. But yeah, okay. So some of the things that we see are coming in the future that we need to look at. The biggest one is demographic changes. The population boom that's coming to Utah in general, into Utah County, will impact us here in Provo. Now, they say the population of Utah County is going to double. I don't by any stretch of the imagination think that that means Provo City's population is going to double, but it will impact Provo City, clearly. And with that, though, our best guess is with that increase in population, household sizes are probably going to remain the same. So every time there's a census or we look at the, between the census, the information that goes along with that, our average household size here in Provo is around 3.5, you know, consistently, which really isn't that much higher than the national average.
Sorry, 3.5
People per household.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
3.5 bedrooms or bathrooms or something. Okay.
So it's about 3.5. So if you have an increase in the county, a doubling of the population, what that probably means county-wide at least, and some impact here in Provo, is that you probably need to double the number of residential units you have in the county. Because we're seeing that household size, and it just kind of holds true. It's the, you know, everybody thinks, oh, we have really big families here in Utah, and we do. But it's the family that has 10 kids is averaged out with the widow that lives across the street. You know, so the average household size eventually overall plays that out. So just a huge amount of construction is going to be needed, which bleeds into some of these other things. One of the big demographics changes is we're kind of getting older and younger at the same time. The baby boomers are now starting to retire in record numbers, and that's going to increase. But yet we have a lot of younger kids countywide coming in, and even in Provo. And so Provo is demographically one of the younger cities in the state and country.
And the younger group are staying single longer.
And they are staying single longer.
And that changes where they need to live and where they want to live until they.
And how they want to live.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so that changes a lot of it, which bleeds into that housing preferences. And so demographically speaking, the housing type that most people are going to want into the future really is the single family home, but increasingly more apartment living, condo living, townhouse living, things like that are increasing in preference. Then that all plays into housing affordability. So, you know, if you double the number of resident or dwelling units you need in the county, we're not doubling the amount of land. And that's not.
What are they talking about as far as the timetable for doubling? I hear from 20 to 50 years. Is there a?
Yeah, and it's a little bit unknown. That the best thing that I've seen from the governor's office is by 2035 to 2040. Yeah, and you know, depending on how things go, it might happen a little sooner or a little later, but that's a decent best estimate. And so with that, you've got the rural, suburban, urban, and we've got all of that in Provo, right? We've got agriculture out here, we've got some fairly dense things in downtown, and we've got a lot of suburban single family neighborhoods. And you know, how we deal with those just as population increases, that's going to be a really hard thing. And then of course all of that and growth means infrastructure, utility, roads, parks. You know, I didn't put, you know, but it's all of that stuff that you can think of. And the whole discussion we had earlier, right?
In our last meeting, I was told there's nothing but urban. Thank you.
Oh. Well, no, you're right. When people say urban design, you can have, what all that mean is, what do your roads look like, really? So you have urban design in a rural area. It's just how it's built. And so you know, that's.
Would urban design be the same for urban neighborhood as a rural neighborhood?
No, it should be very different.
Why do they call it urban design?
Because you have to be an insider to know the terms. It makes you sound smart, I think. I think there's a little bit of that, you know, it's jargon that they throw around. And that's one of the things I see with a lot of discussions in planning or things like that. It's like, ask me someday to tell you that under our ordinances, a 70-foot tall pyramid, if you build a home that was 70 feet tall in pyramid form, you know how high your roof really is? 35 feet. Because we don't calculate things by how actually high it is. We go to a midpoint of a slope and different things like that. So it's all part of that. But I think these are some of the big issues that are on the horizon, and they're really big issues, and everybody's struggling to deal with them. And I think seeing that we're going to have more and more of this coming. And the one thing I'm finding in a meeting, I'll go into a meeting, and it's kind of like going to your doctor. You go to your doctor, the doctor comes in and says, oh, I think you have this ailment and you need this medication. And they turn around to write a prescription, and when they turn around, the patient has their smartphone out going, hold it, wait a minute, what about this? And what about that? And they question everything, saying, you know, and I see that in meetings that I go to. I'll say something and say, well, you know, we don't like that. That doesn't make sense. And as I'm talking, I see them playing with their smartphone, and then at the end of the meeting, they hold it up and said, but they're doing this in West Jordan. Why can't we do it? You know, and so I think everybody, I know Scott Henderson and I were talking about that. He faces that frequently, and it's just going to happen more and more and more. Just this, these issues facing us. And don't have any answers for you, just here to tell you good luck. So, okay, so
can we go about 5 more minutes?
Yep. Okay, Carrie, zoning enforcement.
Oh, we're there.
We're there.
Then we don't need 5 minutes. Go, Karen.
Oh. Okay, well, we can
5
come
minutes
back
for
and
him is
just.
as long as I want.
You got some minutes.
Now this actually, this is the census block numbers from 1940. So it gave you the plat of Zion. We kind of start out, now we're in the 40s, and you can just see how things are different, but they change, but it just keeps morphing.
Provo was about 25,000 in 1940, weren't we? Population.
I think at the most.
Yeah, it's the most.
It's interesting, right above 8th North, it's designated North Provo.
That's pretty. Okay, well.
Well, the power plant, you know why the power plant's where it is?
It was outside of the city.
They went to the farthest part away from the city and they built it because we don't want to be anywhere near or downtown or anything like that. And now we look at the power department, its buildings, you almost consider it.
Smack in the middle of the city.
Yeah, it's smack dab in the middle of the city.
Crossroads.
Okay, just really quick, and my slides are really boring with a lot of stats and information. Our accomplishment for this year, thanks to the council, we were able to increase our numbers of zoning officers from 4 to 6. We've increased inspections on rental properties to verify minimum health and safety standards, and also to verify for occupancy and parking restrictions have been met and complied with. We have successfully adopted the amendment in rental housing to require landlords and tenants to sign a disclosure so that they are both aware of what the restrictions are for housing and occupancy. And we're currently working through all of the informational and educational routes for that. Publicizing of new ordinance information has gone through the mayor's blog. We're working on doing our website, on our webpage, mailers, open houses to inform and educate. Participation in Provo 360, as he said about the building department, we also had to go through and scrub our information and have it prepared to be uploaded and then verify that it was in the correct places, as well as going through our current modules and making sure that everything that we need and desire and are part of our contract are there, and making changes as we need to make our system efficient. We have had a successful implementation of using our iPads by field staff. They can go out into the field if they're investigating a certain complaint. If they see other complaints, they can open a new case, have the owner information, take photos, upload them, and choose what violations they have. So it's right there on the spot. The only thing they can't do is print out the notices of violation. But that's a simple process of coming back into the office, print them up, and send them out. Okay, that's made it more efficient for us. It also means that we're able to, things don't get lost in the flow. Zoning enforcement, so some numbers. So between July 1st, 2017 and April 16th of 2018, the number of total cases we opened were 729. As of Monday, we had closed 511 cases successfully. Okay, of those cases, 135 cases were occupancy. And of those cases that were closed, 84 of them were resolved, so more than half of the occupancy cases. Rental housing, between January 1st, 2018 and April 16th, 2018, we've done approximately 75 initial inspections and re-inspections to verify that the properties are in compliance and are meeting minimum standards. And between those things, it takes approximately 5 man-hours to contact the property owner or the landlord or the manager, go out there, do the inspection, prepare the correction letter if there is one, make sure that they understand their time frame, contact them again to make sure that they have an inspection rescheduled, and then go out there and complete that. If it's more complex where they still have additional items, it would take at least 2 more man-hours, 2 to 3 man-hours to complete that, Dave.
So you have, these are statistics between July 1st and April 16th.
Right, I don't have the inspection information all the way back to July.
Oh, and that's fine. So someone could have opened a case, say on April 15th, and that would be listed as one of the currently open ones.
Correct. Correct.
How many cases were open? And so like the number of cases closed, that's not necessarily the number of cases total that were closed within that time period. It's just of those 729 that were opened in that time period.
511 were closed. Correct.
Okay, but
We could have closed more from earlier time frames.
because I imagine January 1st there were some open cases.
Yes.
Jerry, one other thing that'd be interesting, this council's talked a lot about budgeting for outcomes. And I'd be interested in looking at years back. Have you got those figures by chance? That we
For
could look
inspections?
for inspections for a lot of these things right here, so we can see, okay, is this the outcome? We've got 2 new budget officers. Is
Right.
it representing the outcome that we would like to see?
We didn't have that capability until we got Provo 360
So
online.
now we'll deal
Now
with
we
that.
will be,
can
going
moving
forward, it will be,
Awesome.
we'll be
That'll
able to
help.
have those
I think
numbers.
that'll make a
I
big
think so
difference for
too.
council.
Right. Dave?
Well, hate to bring it up again, but the Complete Streets policy proposal had some key indicators that they said that they were going to track. And I think now that we have 360 coming online, I think it would be good to identify, and maybe that's what council needs to do, maybe that's what you could propose to us, but if we had some that we could track over the years and make sure that we're heading in the right direction and getting the outcomes that we're looking for.
I agree. I agree. That's a great
And we
idea.
think that's a great idea, and it would help the council and its oversight responsibility of community development and zoning enforcement in particular. I don't know that that we could probably work up some things and propose them, key indicators.
I have some ideas for that. One of the things that has always worried me is that we have some cases that have been open for years and years and years and years. And I have a flow chart, which we try to stick to. However, there are extenuating circumstances, and that's one of the key indicators is, okay, how long is it taking us to get from the time this type of a case is open to the time it's closed successfully? Not just because, oh, it's getting too old and we need to open a new case. So there are certainly some indicators that we could track over time and be able to see if we're meeting our goals and if we need to increase something somewhere so that we can put it before you and you can make an informed decision as to what you feel would need to happen or what direction we need to go.
Yeah. And we now have that capability with the new program.
So this is some of the items that we've done. We've already discussed. I wanted to share with you a little bit. So April 10th, I had an open house over at the rec center, was largely unadvertised. I think Mayor Kafusi's email to people who were signed up for emails. I got one. Thank you very much. And we also had information on the blog. I got about 8 people, and some of them, they pointed out to me that I lack the fact that this disclosure does not apply to accessory apartments or supplementary apartments or homeowner occupied that maybe have 2 roommates that they rent to, that type of thing. So I need to make some changes in my advertising. But the discussion was really great. Had several people that were didn't like the fact that they felt like their rights were we were stepping in and pushing a little too close to home. But other people understood. I had samples of what the license would look like. I had a copy of the letters that were going out, other information to people. And so I was really quite pleased. And that's one of my favorite parts of my job, is to go to neighborhood meetings or go do these open houses and talk to people and educate them. And so I really felt like that was a success, even with just 8 people. Now, the one in May, I am expecting a lot of people, but we'll see. So,
Can I ask for a clarification on that as well?
sure.
So you just said that people pointed out that it doesn't apply to accessory apartments?
It doesn't,
homeowners?
because we do not require a homeowner occupied dwelling with an accessory apartment to have a rental dwelling license. This disclosure only applies to rental properties in full. So if a homeowner lives in their home and they rent out 2 bedrooms to 2 other people and they're their roommates, they're not required to get a rental license. Okay, the same thing with an accessory or supplementary apartment. The main home is owner occupied, so that supplementary apartment is not a separate unit. So we, at this time, do not require a rental license.
Okay.
That makes sense?
In an apartment building
Apartment building, yes,
would require for every
yes,
unit.
right. And as Gary said, I've gotten quite a few emails, and that information is on the mayor's blog as well as in the letter about, contacting us. If your license is renewed between now and August 1st, the back of the license should have the disclosure form. If you renewed January to April, or you renew August 2nd to December, you're not going to get that until you actually renew or re-renew, okay? So we're working, I'm going to be sending out individual personalized disclosure forms that people in those particular circumstances can use. And yes, the influx of requests has been pretty big. I expect it to be even bigger when everybody does receive their mailers as well. And so that is going to take some extra manpower. The other thing that we have been doing is working on cleaning up some data in the licensing module, and that also takes staff time as well. So we have a few little projects.
Just a suggestion on the education front, the Realtors Association had offered to do a seminar to help us publicize this.
Right.
If the administration is amenable, they've got a pretty good reach. Might be something to take advantage of.
Yeah, definitely. That would be a great idea. I have contacted BYU. Craig and I keep missing each other, and I know that Craig from Off-Campus Housing is retiring this year, and so this month actually. And then I have reached out to UVU as well. Haven't heard anything back yet. So we are looking at a lot of various things. I talked to everybody and whether they want me to or not. So any other questions? No? I think that's it. Yes. Ta-da.
Thank you very much. One item that I forgot, we need to have an approval of minutes for the March 27th 2018 board meeting. Did anyone have a chance to look at those things that was in their agenda today? Did we have a chance to look at those?
I didn't miss that. I didn't prepare for this like I did.
Yeah, is it okay? We'll carry that one forward then. Make sure that all the council have a chance to look at that. We'll now go on to item number 4. No, 5, I think we got there. Regarding the new rental ordinance, the advertising. Now we'll go to 5, presentation of the mayor's office. Potential budget request there.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. We are just going to give you a quick rundown on our budget to try to respond to some of the questions that were asked last year that you asked us to get some more information on. So we will try to do that. We'll get you back on schedule. You're only 5 minutes out, so hopefully we'll get you right back on schedule. So functions of the mayor's office is defined in code and in the budget. We oversee the enforcement of city ordinances and policies, submit an annual budget recommendation to you, and manage the day-to-day budget, supervise the activities of government, promote the city, and enhance the city's reputation, inform and engage residents on city issues, and then manage the brand, which is been a relatively recent addition to our areas of responsibility. We reviewed the vision statements from Vision 2030 in the general plan that Bryce prepared. We concur with those that as being kind of key elements to the mayor's responsibility to promote awareness, effectively communicate with a broad spectrum of our residents, brand the community in ways that makes people want to be in Provo, and then promote and enhance our quality of life in general. I want to talk just quickly about staffing. So we have 6 full-time employees in the core mayor's office. So I'm excluding now, we'll talk separately about media services because they haven't been in this year. We're not talking about customer service or economic development because they've already been in to share with you their budget components. So this is kind of the core mayor's office. So we have 4 professional level folks with the mayor and the deputy mayor, the chief administrative officer, and then our communications specialist. And then we have 2 clerical staff positions in the office, and then we have a seasonal part-time intern. So other than this year, when the parking administrator started in the mayor's office and then transferred mid-year to community development, we have not had a staffing change in 10 years in the office since we divided the deputy mayor and the communications roles. This was back in the Raylene Ireland era during Mayor Billings' time. When Raylene retired, we replaced, she was irreplaceable. You know Raylene, remember her, you'll know how irreplaceable she was. And so we actually split the role then. It used to be the director of communications. It was a director level position. So we split that into 2 roles. What was then kind of the public information officer and then the intergovernmental relations role. We divided those 2 and then and have maintained that general structure. We call them different names, but the same professional staff that we had from 10 years ago.
And who is that now?
So Isaac Paxman is the deputy mayor. Whitney Booth is our communications and social media specialist. Wendy's currently on maternity leave, and as you know, Gina Roby left us when Congressman Curtis left, went to work for his district office. We're actually down 2 full-time people right now, and it's telling. We're feeling it. So anyway, the structure basically hasn't changed in the last 10 years. The city's gotten infinitely more complex in that 10-year time period, and communications is very different. It used to be when Helen Anderson was here running our sort of PR effort, it was all about the mass media. So it was newspapers and television stations and broadcast media, and that's shifted significantly now. And social media has given us an opportunity to really have an unfiltered, direct contact with our residents, and we used to struggle with that. We still do the city newsletters, and we'll go through some of those functions in a minute, but newsletter readership is not what it used to be. In fact, we were commenting yesterday as we've been talking to the rooftop concert folks about maybe making some changes in the schedule, and We realized that we had to get our newsletter has to go to press today for the newsletter, which will arrive in homes by the end of May. And so that gives you a little sense that we're always about 6 weeks behind just for printing and distribution purposes. But we also said that people who read the city newsletter when it comes in their utility bill are not the same people who go to rooftop concerts. And so again, we have to use multiple communication channels to get to our multiple stakeholders. So in media services, we have 2 full-time people. We did consolidate when Brian Nye left our employment. We decided to kind of rethink the sort of graphic design area. We used to have 2 full-time people in there, so we converted Brian's former position to a web developer and put it into information services. And then we moved the graphic designer into media services, so we eliminated that division that used to be in our office and consolidated those roles. And we think that makes a lot more sense to separate the technical from the graphic and let the technical have the support that that position would need in IT. And then we moved the graphic design into media services. And so Brett Borgett now supervises that particular role. And other than that, we just have part-time employees in the media services division. So our budget divisions that are in the core mayor's office, and we'll talk separately about media services at the end. So we have 5 different financial divisions where we've broken up our budget, and we'll talk about that. So we have a mayor budget, which really is sort of the core functions of the mayor's office. Deputy mayor has a separate division in the budget, CAO does as well, and then public information. And then we have a mayor general budget, which is mostly around chargebacks and utility costs and those kinds of things. So that's kind of how our budget's broken out. So I want to run through just kind of some of the notable components of our budget, just so you understand where it comes from. So our interlocal contributions, so to the Utah Lake Commission, our membership in MAG, and our membership in the Utah League of Cities and Towns is covered. That's about $130,000 of our of the mayor's office budget. We have contract services, so we contract out to the Daily Herald, for example, the printing of the newsletter, which goes out in a monthly utility bill. We have a contract service with Qualtrics to allow us to do some surveying and polling during the year on key issues of question and concern. We have a number of special events and public engagement efforts that we'll highlight for you here. And then interestingly enough, we have the graffiti abatement contract. I don't know why that's in the mayor's office necessarily, but it was there when I got there. And so that's actually part of my budget operation and part of my responsibility. Again, I think that dates back to the time when police and fire reported. But again, we manage that contract with the TAG team, the Teens Against Graffiti, that goes out and does graffiti abatement for us. And so again, so we monitor that and share that information, collaborate with the police department on that one. So special events and public engagement. So our rooftop concert contract is housed in the mayor's office. And we sponsor basically 1 concert a year that is paid for out of the mayor's office budget. And so they have to find sponsors for the others, but this kind of creates the base level of support for the rooftop concerts organization. Again, it's a separate private sector company that puts on the rooftop concerts, and so we essentially contract as a sponsor. The mayor's office does 1 of those. And then there have historically been 5. I think this year we're down to 3 that we'll do this summer. Again, in part because of budget constraints for us, as well as their interest in not going out and spending a lot of time and energy fundraising. So they're going to kind of stick with 3 key sponsors, and that will be it this year. So again, there's been some interest in maybe morphing the concert series, at least on the part of the private organizers, maybe looking at more of doing a one-time arts festival of some kind in the downtown and make it a bigger, week-long event, as opposed to doing 3 or 5 Friday nights during the summer season. We also
is that going through the rooftop then? Are they coming back with recommendations on that, or is it
We're just right now they're just trying to get this summer series off the ground. But again, they've expressed an interest in maybe thinking about doing something a little different. with rooftop. It's, when you have to close the streets and import the stage and set up the sound system and then tear it all down, afterward, it's a 2.5 day setup and a full day cleanup. And they're kind of saying, gosh, if we only had to rent the stage once and set it up once and, leave it up in a given location for 4 or 5 days, maybe that's a smarter way to do it, get more bang for your buck. And so anyway, there's just some conversations going on that. Civic events, we do a number of things like the Memorial Day celebration, Veterans Day, Bike to Work Day, International Women's Day, the Girls Summit, and some of those kinds of things. And we also manage the Freedom Festival parade route. Some of you were here a number of years ago. Or remember when we set up the camping restrictions on University Avenue and Center Street. So the city has responsibility to manage the route before camping restrictions take over. And so we actually pay a number of our city employees to work some overtime for us to be what we call ambassadors along the route, which basically means they stand there and say, don't set up until 3 o'clock. Please don't set up till 3 o'clock. Hope you're having fun. Come get a bottle of water, but hope you wait until 3 o'clock to set up. And so that comes out of the mayor's office budget as well. So our contribution to the management of the route prior to the parade is part of our responsibility.
Wayne, will the BRT infrastructure impact the parade route at all?
No, not this year.
Next year?
Not entirely sure yet. They're still debating whether there's really not another good route. But by the time you have a setup spot and a cleanup spot for the parade, University Avenue is about the only game in town. You could maybe do 5th West, but there's just not really another area where you've got staging and wrap-up space.
On the infrastructure, the station's impact having a route?
Yeah, up to this point, what the parade committee is telling us is they're going to do some weaving this year, and that will be kind of the experiment to see if that works. There was a suggestion actually about just because the parade has never taken up the full width of University Avenue, so there was a sense that maybe we should just shrink the parade route over to one side. The challenge with that is that by the time you actually close University Avenue to traffic, it's pretty early in the morning, and trying to move all the spectators out into University Avenue and then getting them out of the roadway in time to reopen it we think, is a little bit of a logistical challenge. But again, so the parade committee is kind of working through some alternatives and looking at it. But at this point, they're not expecting to move the parade off University Avenue. So again, those are all expenses that are borne just on an annual basis, kind of out of our budget. So a number of city programs. We also support the Sustainability Committee and the Clean Air Committee. And so expenses related to that activities, in terms of, providing a lunch meeting or doing those kinds of things. We do an annual, in an effort to build relationships with our other Utah County cities, we do an annual event at the Covey where we invite all the Utah County mayors and their families to join us at the Covey Center. And so we have to have dinner and then take them to an event. We also host UMPA every year at the Rec Center with all the UMPA board members and their families. And so those sorts of events we pay for out of our event budget. Provo City Birthday Party, and again, that's varied from year to year. Sometimes it's been more extreme than other years, but again, trying to get around town, we buy a lot of balloons and birthday cakes and go to different groups and have an opportunity to celebrate during Provo's birthday week in early April. We do resident and employee satisfaction surveys where we go out and actually see how we're doing. How's our customer service? How are people feeling about our services? And then we also survey our employees as well, and that's been part of our Qualtrics contract. And we've also used outside groups to do that. We've used Y2 Analytics to do a number of our outside surveys. Again, we do the city utility newsletter and the email newsletters. So when we do the once or twice a month email blast with various things, we pay for that. That's on a contract basis. We do the Provo Pulse and some other surveys that are sort of one-time. Let's talk about a specific issue and see our informed residents are feeling about that. And then we do Provology, which is our Citizens Academy, and that gets covered out of our budget as well. We also then have a number of and I've just tried to give you a rough list. These change sort of every year, but they're kind of unique, or what I would call opportunity events. And so these would be things like there was a event a couple of years ago to Ride the Parkway, where we brought a bunch of bicyclists in and we rode the parkway and had them do some critiquing on the level of service on the parkway or areas of safety concern. We've also done as another Ride the Parkway where we invited residents to come at twilight and actually provide a presence on the parkway so that when joggers and so on are out there at dusk and dark, that there's a lot more people on the parkway, and tried to evaluate whether that was a major improvement to safety in the area. So again, some of those kinds of opportunities. When we got into deer abatement, we actually put up the website to let people know how to come request services from the deer abatement program. And we do an inauguration every 4 years. We pay for that out of our budget. And for this year's budget, we actually saved some money from the prior year, knowing that we were coming into an inauguration year, so that we have funds to do the inauguration. And then we've done the contract with Robert Carter, where every 2 years we do a new book on Provo's history. We've been charting since the days of Fort Utah and doing about 10-year increments and writing a new history book every year with the idea of creating a comprehensive history of Provo over a period of time. And so that's programmed in our budget as well.
Got a question about that. We had, at our meeting with the Landmarks Commission, they mentioned that no historical society in Provo.
Yes. That'd be awesome.
I
I
would be happy to sort of get to work on that,
Sure.
but I don't know if that's something. I mean, I assume a historical society is made up of volunteers, but is there typically is that typically a city-sponsored entity that would need a modest
It could,
budget?
yeah,
or
it's
is this
not
something
uncommon.
that's entirely independent.
Yeah, other cities where I've worked, there have been kind of a contract with the Historical Society to provide certain services to them, and so that would not be at all unusual.
I don't know if there's overlap, but we have the Landmarks Commission.
Right.
And I would think that the people on the Landmarks Commission would be very interested in history, but I don't know if they want to do double duty and do any more than they're doing.
Right, yeah.
They didn't sound like they wanted to do
Right,
that.
and I think it is.
And they sounded interested in having, some historians who really specialize, Robert Carter certainly being among them.
Yeah.
To even guide and
Yeah.
direct them in some ways.
In a lot of ways, Robert's kind of filled that role over the years of kind of being the one-man historical society, but I agree with you. In other cities where I've worked, it's been a very important component of the community to document and enjoy and appreciate the history.
So with BYU, can we enlist anyone up there that has a professor or classes that
That's what I
would
want
take it on?
Yeah. I think that's a great thing to look at.
Wait, you're close here?
I am. Let me just quickly, yep. So we do also do resident recognition at council meetings. So when we do a mayor's award of excellence or those kinds of things, those come out of our budget. When we do town hall meetings and events, they can be on specific topics. So for example, when we did the medical school town hall meeting, we covered the cost of that out of our budget. So again, just an effort to try to do a little more outreach. We do a number of contests. We do a photo contest every year, which is great because we get a whole bunch of royalty-free photos that we can use on social media, and we spend a couple of $1,000s in prizes on that, and we get $50,000 worth of photos that we can utilize in our print and social media. And then when we do every 2 or 3 years, we try to go in and do a little refresh on the website. Keep it fresh, and we're in the midst of one of those right now. And so again, those expenses have come out of the mayor's office budget. So there we go. Okay, so I just wanted to highlight again some of the questions around a lot of these kinds of services that we've offered out of the mayor's office. And so I've just kind of given you a breakdown by the divisions of the mayor's office. So if you add our events cost, our public engagement revenue or expenditures, and our contractual services that are related to those kinds of activities, we're about $140,000 roughly out of the entire city, the entire budget for the mayor's office. If you combine those 5 functions in the mayor's office, our total budget's $1.4 million. So it's just at 10% of our total budget is spent on those kinds of issues. And again, we don't think that's out of line. It's certainly in line with what a lot of other cities do. And so again, just wanted to highlight a couple of the benefits. We talked about media services. You had a long discussion with Brett Borgett several months ago about video programming and those kinds of things. And it is a really wonderful tool for us to put a lot of emphasis into media services. So online engagement, again, social media and videos are important elements. I gave you a few stats here at the bottom, and not to pick on our neighbors to the north, but we blow them out of the water on civic engagement. And so we just wanted you to know that we do track what happens on our social media channels and how that grows over time and how we compare with other cities. And then finally, again, we've talked a lot about sort of the recognitions. We recognize that a lot of that is a little bit artificial. Every little group has their own recognition standards. But I want to point out a couple of them that I think we've kind of touted. The Utah County as being the #2 metro for millennials. That doesn't happen in Saratoga Springs that much, but it certainly happens in Provo and Orem. And actually, renter satisfaction was the key factor in that analysis. And renter satisfaction has a lot to do about how people feel about living in Provo. And for all we hear about renters being executive office for social media engagement in the country. And so again, those are things we're proud of, and we think are influenced by the kinds of things we try to do as a city in terms of outreach to our residents. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. You'll be seeing our budget shortly, and it'll again be a little lower next year than it is this year, largely because we're transferring some of the money for parking services that started in our budget over to community development. So theirs will be going up and ours will be going down, but it's the same general concept we've had for a number of years. So any questions on our budget? Pretty straightforward. Okay, well, thanks. We look forward to talking to you.
We look forward to seeing that budget. Okay, Brian, we're gonna skip you want to do your budget, or do you take less than 5 minutes? Okay, you got it. Okay. Apologize.
I ran you over, sorry.
Okay, our budget for the council office totals about $1.065 million. It's really a stand-pat budget this year. This is how our functions are split up: administration, legislation, communications, and programs. This shows the way it's broken up. So most of our costs are salary and benefits for all the staff and the council members. This is set by the administration. Essentially, they're just chargebacks. This is the discretionary portion of the council budget. So staff and personnel costs, 5 FTE, 7 council members and interns, and then other benefit costs. These are the chargebacks I mentioned. This is the council budget. Now, the only thing that we're changing this year is that our audit goes up by about $1,000 a year. We haven't changed that in a few years, and so we've jumped this from about $42,000 to $45,000 to meet the obligation this year. The only other thing I would suggest is maybe we move council communications from the neighborhood program and throw it down under council programs. I thought of that after I did the chart, but basically it's a stand-pat budget for us with the exception of that minor change and whatever other program changes come from personnel costs, et cetera, et cetera. And in terms of where we are in terms of the Vision 2030, really we all the council office fits in under governance, and we've made efforts the last couple of years to improve transparency and communications, and even run a few programs. Now, there is one other item that we'll have to figure out in the budget season. That is what to do with the $21,000 for Ms. Provo, particularly with respect to the float. And I think you're all aware of that. So that discussion will.
We're going to be having that discussion as a council in the next little while. Just to bring you up to speed on that, we have, with where we're at, we've decided to go with the flow on this for this year. But there are discussions. We have to deal with floats. We have to deal with different things around this Provo and the float that we need to coordinate together. So we as a council will bring us back to the council and have some presentations on that and some discussion around what around that $21,000.
We've decided,
No, we've decided to bring it back to the council. Is what we've decided to do. The council, there have not been any decisions made. We all made. Well, wait a minute. I'm going to take that back. This year, we have decided as an administration and the council that was in the budget, that was already doing it, we're not going to change anything. It's go with what we've got for this year. It was basically decided last year's council that this is what would happen. And so we are not changing anything for this year. That Ms. Provo has asked us to come and say, we are tired of the way that it's been done, and we would like to know a different solution. And so that's the discussion that we as a council need to have for coming years.
Mr. Winterson, for clarity then, for the fiscal year 2018 that we're coming to the end of, no change, but fiscal year 2019, which is this proposed budget for next year, is where you're going to have to make a decision as a council.
Exactly.
All right. Any questions?
Where'd
Do you have
get
any
that first
questions?
photograph?
What's that?
Where'd you get that first photograph?
We had an intern. I assume he hiked it because
That's right.
I haven't seen that view.
Well, I don't know, maybe, it sure looks like it, but.
But I liked it. In fact, in the original, it's got the whole circle of this thing, and you can see the good portion of the city over here.
Yeah, this is an Orem along the Bonneville shoreline looking down at Provo, but
Okay.
it's because I was biking on the trail when I took that picture.
Did you submit it to the Provo City?
I don't,
should maybe
it's
in the
not, it
photo.
just.
Photo content.
Uncanny resemblance to when I posted just a month or so ago.
I'll have to ask Colin where he got it.
I'm not complaining, I'm flattered.
Cliff, also, when we get our budgets, are we gonna have some, I still would like to see the comparisons from this year and last year on a lot of these things that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So that we can look and see what's happening between this year. You say it's the same. I can see some, we probably have a few changes with, how much did we spend, for example, this year we're kind of blowing the whole neighborhood grant program with the last little project that we put in.
Right.
Along with.
So you're asking for a difference between budget and actual, and we can give you the data on the actuals. This is just the budget. In terms of the budget, and for that 217,000, it was $2,700 less in that line item last year, or for the current year.
I think it's just so helpful for the council to see what we spent
Yeah.
and what we're projecting.
And we're actually pretty frugal. A good portion of this money will end up going back into the general fund balance, but it gives us the flexibility to do the things we need when we need. And so some years we'll spend like professional services. 2 years ago, I don't think we spent any. Last year, this current year, I think we spent 4. So plus the audit monies, right? So it's how it works, and you'll see that we don't actually spend a high percentage of the discretionary funds.
Thank you. Now, Brian.
All right.
We'll go to that.
So we have had a request for a closed session. I believe there's 2 matters to discuss. One of them involves sale or purchase of property, which you're very familiar with. The other one involves a possible purpose for a closed meeting that we haven't dealt with at least in my time here, but in the statute, it also allows closed meetings for discussions regarding deployment of security personnel devices or systems. And so based on that, it would be appropriate for a motion to close the meeting at this time.
Is it second?
Mr. Stewart.
Okay, the 2 Georges. Those in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. And